Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. I'm calling the meeting of the Buckhannon City Council to order. The first thing on our agenda, as everybody I hope has, is we're going to open up for 3 public hearings. The first one we're looking at tonight is a public hearing on Ordinance 385, the Comprehensive Plan. That is Buckhannon, the City of Buckhannon's comprehensive plan that we have to have sent to the state to actually allow us to fulfill our obligations. And I see some of our planning commission members here. It actually is a blueprint for the rest of, well, it's called the Buckhannon Comprehensive Plan 2020. And I will open up the floor to any discussions within the public that would like to discuss that. Anybody here on the Buckhannon 2020 plan, the comprehensive plan, and that is Ordinance 385. Well, having none heard, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing for Ordinance 385, the comprehensive plan. So I have a motion and a second.
Second.
And I have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Aye, pose same sign. Next in line is a public hearing for Ordinance 386. That is the zoning of the ADS property, and technically what this is the way for us to go from the most limited zoning within the county. Whenever you come into the county under annexation, you come in as residential 1. Residential 1 limits anything that you could actually do besides having a residence. We have made it a commercial district, which is actually what this business is. And if you're not familiar, it's over by the movie theater, and it's actually an auctions place for automobiles. So I'd open up the floor to the audience for anybody that wants to discuss the ADS property. Well, then I would accept the motion if I don't have anybody in the audience that wants to say anything, or is there anybody on council that wants to mention this? All right. Then I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing for Ordinance 388, zoning of the ADS property.
Motion.
I have Pam Kapari as a motion, and I have a second by Mr. Pugh. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Last but not least, on our public hearing list tonight, we have public hearing of Ordinance 387, the college zone repeal. This, as you may be familiar with, is at one point that the city council had determined that with West Virginia Wesleyan College, the college zone, with interest from the city planning commission, it came back to us, and they asked us to repeal that, and we made that part of our ordinance to repeal that area. Do I have anybody in the audience that would like to speak to that? All right, then I would entertain a motion. Well, actually, I'll ask City Council if there's any discussion on that. All right, then I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing for Ordinance 387, the college zone repeal.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Pugh, a second?
Second.
By Mrs. Kupari. You can't do it at the same time. All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We went through that awfully quick, so that kind of surprises me. What we do on the next thing is our normal tradition. I'll ask for a moment of silence or meditation, and then we'll follow it with the Pledge of Allegiance. Very well. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, again, let me thank everyone for being here tonight. It's always so nice to see all of our community, as many as we have tonight here with us. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing any college students with us tonight, which is our normal tradition that we always introduce our college students.
On Christmas break.
There are, but that's still our normal tradition, so unfortunately we don't see any. Is there anyone else that would like to stand and introduce themselves that are students or not? Very well then. Having moving on from that, then I have actually Mr. Timothy Reese will recognize under a recognized guest who's asked to speak. And I'm not sure.
Okay.
Please,
May I
Mr.
say
Reese.
that I didn't know the procedure for, as you are discussing things, how to ask a question. I didn't know if I had to be specific on there that I was going to ask a question about topics. So I said I'd like to speak in order to ask a question as topics proceed. How do we do that? Just raise our hand back here?
Yes, sir. We'd be happy to.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Okay.
We'd be happy to do that for you.
Thank you.
Very well. I have nobody else that's signed up to speak, unless you're somebody that did not get an opportunity to sign in to speak that would like to speak and from the audience. Very well, then. We will move on to our...
Can I ask something then?
Why, Mr. Reese, we would love to have you ask a question.
Thank you. During the beginning of when I came down to speak with some problems with the college zones, this has nothing to do with the college zone, but I did bring up a residence building across the street from me, and I handed some pictures out about how dilapidated it was, and it's really a fire trap. And so anyhow, since then I have communicated with, I read this ordinance that said either the zoning commissioner can visually walk up and see, hey, that's a problem, or a citizen can, let it be known. So I have contacted him by phone and by email, and that was back in September. And then according to this, there's supposed to be a hearing, and then they have so many days to comply, and then they're supposed to be torn down or fined or whatever goes on after that. And I want to know, what is the process? How come nothing has become of this since I brought this up?
Okay, let me make sure I understand what you're asking. Back in September, you found a house that you believe to be dilapidated or in poor condition that does not meet the ordinance that you're specifying, and you contacted our zoning officer, which in this case would be Rich Clemens, am I correct?
Correct.
And how did you actually inform him of this? Did you inform him by writing him or correspondence? All right. In that case, what would normally happen, the normal process through the city process, would be that Mr. Clemens at that point would most likely go do an inspection. If he found that there were any issues that violated our zoning code, he would bring it to the he would actually cite or let these folks know. Not yet. Let me finish with the process I'm telling you. He would then cite or explain to the person or the owner of that property the issues that they do have within the zoning ordinance. If there's an issue with that and they don't like, the property owner in this case does not like his determination upon his inspection, the next issue would be, once he cited them for the issue, would go to he could appeal, the property owner could appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals. In this case, I'm not aware of any citation that had been given. So in my opinion, at this point, Mr. Clemens did not find any reason to believe or to cite this person for that. Now, Mr. Clemens is not with us tonight, so unfortunately, I cannot ask the question whether or not, whichever property you're talking about,
Right.
but unfortunately, I'm uninformed of what you're talking about.
Right. Well, let me just say this, that...
Well, let me finish what
Okay.
happens after that. Then the Zoning Board of Appeals goes ahead and looks at whatever the citation is that the zoning officer has given. And then they will determine whether or not, yes or no, that this citation should or not be applied in this case. After that, then there's another appeal that can go on after that. But in this case, there wasn't one. So you may go ahead and... you can
Right,
move on.
so according to you, nothing has been filed in any way whatsoever. But I was told that was next on the list because the one across the street had to be done first, and he said, the original one, that's next on the list, the bucket list or the waiting list. And then I was told after a meeting here that because some of us had come out against the college zone, that the college may not want to tear that down at all now. And I didn't know it was up to the college not to want to tear it down if it was, it's already been looked at for asbestos and stuff like that, then it just gets dropped. So I was told it was next on the list, but I can't find anything else about it.
Unfortunately, as much as I'd love to address the situation you're talking about,
Right.
I cannot do so because I am uninformed of the circumstances.
Right, that's why I brought it up
surrounding you.
here, maybe something.
If you would,
I'd like to interject.
well, let me finish up with just one thing. If you would like to, by the end of this meeting, give to the city recorder or assistant city recorder the information that you have and the address we can investigate within the council to do so. And we'd be more than happy to do so and talk with Mr. Clemens on that. Mr. Thomas, you'd like something to say, sir?
Well, yeah, there's a process that is a little bit different than what you outlined.
All right.
Rick, and that's a housing enforcement board.
Yes, that's right.
And
My
we
apologies.
have, unfortunately, the housing enforcement board has not met for 6 months. And it used to meet once a month, then it went every quarter. And I think one of the issues that we have as a council is we need to take a very serious look at the process and the procedure in respect to the properties that are not meeting compliance with the ordinances. And that, the Housing Enforcement Board needs to be active. It's bent over backwards to work with the property owners to give them a timeline to bring their properties in compliance with the ordinances. But, we just have not been, if you all remember Tucker and Ritchie Street, how long it took that to get accomplished. I think it's one of the black eyes that we have as a council and as a city, that we don't, really process and proceed with the ordinances on a timely manner to help the residents so that they have a neighborhood that they feel comfortable with. And, that's one of the issues that we need to deal with. I know Ron has asked before on several occasions to get documentation of the letters that went out to the property owners to make sure that there was follow-up. And I just don't think we've had the follow-up that's needed to really do the job, Tim, that you're asking about. So,
Well, that's a very good point, and I apologize. There is the Housing Enforcement Board. It has been quite a while. I've had many boards that we've discussed. And Mr. Reese, did you understand what Mr.
Yes,
Thomas was talking about?
this was just the Housing Enforcement Board.
Fantastic. And yes, that is, and I would concur with you, Mr. Thomas, that, yeah, that is something that we have neglected. Again, I'll take fault for that and say that we will actually reconvene that pretty soon. Mr. Peter, you have something to say?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to suggest that we have Mr. Clemens attend the next meeting of the City Council so that he may address the issue as to why he has or has not taken action on this particular problem. I know Mr. Reese has been very concerned about the problems in and around his property up here across the street. If that's possible, sir, I'd like to have him attend.
I would suggest that we have a housing enforcement board meeting sometime within the next 30 days. Because there are a lot. The last one we had, there were 5 properties, if my memory's correct, which usually it's not, that were cited and were given X amount of time to get their properties in compliance. And I'm not sure what where that stands right now, but it needs to be done.
Understood. And we can absolutely do both things. Mr. Pugh, we can suggest that Mr. Clemens come before the council again to give a report on such matters. And Mr. Thomas, I agree with you 100% that it's time. I sat as recorder at that time during those meetings, and I do recall the time is just about up for that. So unfortunately, at that point, I could not call the meetings. So we can absolutely do that. Mr. Reese, does that satisfy your question, sir?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much for your input and your question. We appreciate that. Moving on from there, then, any other recognized guests would like to speak? Then I have our department and board reports. We start off with Chief Gregory of the Police Department. Chief Gregory, would you please?
Good evening. Just a few things to report on. The police department is very busy closing out a very busy, active year, 2014. We're preparing some projects in the upcoming year, just kind of starting to lay the groundwork on some of those. We're looking at, with the success of our VIBS program, it's proving to be a very worthwhile cause that the police department has endeavored in. And we, as I've mentioned in the past, we still seek applications. We're just constantly keeping that open. We've had a couple more come in the last couple weeks, and some interest in the program as well. So with that in mind and the success of the program, I've had some other interest in a full Citizens Police Academy, which is a program that we've had with the police department for a number of years. It's been a very successful program for those who have attended. And the training program that we put our VIPS members through was kind of a crash course, an abbreviated version of the Citizens Academy. And again, with expressing interest not only with VIPS but throughout the community of having another one, we're looking at putting something together as we progress into the new year. That being said, we also will be gearing up for our Youth Police Academy that we had a couple years ago. We skipped this last summer, focusing on the VIPS program, and not to mention the monumental move that we made from City Hall to our new building that occupied much of our time this summer. But we're going to get back into that as well, and we'll be gearing up for that as we progress into the summer. Again, that will be open to all middle school and high school age students, giving them a hands-on look at what police officers do and what it's like to be a law enforcement officer. So just a couple of the projects that we'll be working on, more to come, obviously, as we progress into the new year on that, and some other projects that we will be working on as well. The only other thing I have to report on tonight, aside from that, is the recent promotion of one of our officers. Mark Stewart had met the minimum requirements in terms of the amount of years that was required to be spent consecutively with the police department, and he did test and pass the sergeant's examination, and effective November 10th, 2014, he was promoted to the rank of sergeant by virtue of his qualifications. So I just wanted to report on that, enter that into the record tonight if I could, and that's all I have in terms of the police department unless there are questions.
Thank you, Chief Gregory. Any questions from Chief Gregory from the council?
Comment. I'm looking forward again to the children's, because it was really a worthwhile program for high school and middle school kids.
Yeah, I still have kids coming up with the
I do
programs
too.
in middle school and high school. They still come up and engage us and say, hey, we were in the youth academy and we did this. And
That's great.
that's success in and of itself. So
Congratulations on your efforts out into the community, and we always respect what you do, and let your officers know we respect, and we wish them Godspeed over the holiday season.
sure, thank you.
All right, next we have in line, what is my thingy? Tom Landis? Or is it Kelly? It's Kelly this time, and no, it's Tom? Tom, I hope I do it right one this time. Tom Landis, Water Department, please.
At our recent water board meeting, we updated the water board, discussed some new regulatory requirements coming down the pike, some deadlines that's going to be required to be met by April 1, 2016, primarily with our compliance monitoring out in distribution. We do bacteriological sampling. They've tightened the net up, so to speak, and made it a little more user-friendly on their part to be able to check systems across the state and make sure that we're doing what they require us to do. And it's just a tightening up of the reg, basically is what it is. And that's a new total call form rule. We also began stage 2 compliance monitoring. It's a after effect of the results that EPA found in stage 1. That's a disinfection with chlorination practices. They know there are some carcinogenic things that happen with water over time with chlorine and organics. So there's a new study out in stage 2. Of course, all of these things are going to cost us, the utility, a little more money out of our pocket to do these things, but we don't have much choice. We have to comply with them. Kelly reports that all the equipment services are up to date on the equipment in the entire department. They've been working diligently on bad weather days to make sure that happens. He also reports all the parts are in for the fire line at St. Govian. That'll be a project that they'll soon be starting. They've already installed the new backflow at St. Govian, so that project is part of the project is completed. Working with Mr. Holland, he has met all 3 of the deadlines with the above ground storage tank rule, which is a result of the chemical spill in Charleston. There's 2 parts to that bill. The storage tank part, we've complied with all the mandates. On the source water protection side of that regulatory requirement, we had our first public meeting December the 8th. I believe that was last week. And we had some folks that were identified for committee purposes, mandated by the regulation who had to be there. We were a little disappointed we didn't get the public input that we were seeking and would hope to have had. So we're going to try to reach out a little harder at our next meeting, which should be late February or early March of 2015. We really want the public to give us some feedback, give us an idea of where the community would like to go with this source water protection idea. So we're very interested in that. And the State Health Department came in the week before and met with Mr. Holland and I. And where we're at in complying with that new regulation is we're well above most of the systems in the state. They were very, very pleased with that. The last thing I would like to bring up with council, and I apologize that I wasn't prepared, or I'm not well prepared, but I've had conversation with Mr. Dawson and the mayor the last couple of months. I'm a board member of West Virginia Rural Water Association. At the last legislative session, Rural Water met and tried to negotiate with the Public Service Commission on some problematic issues with water and wastewater, in particular the O&M, the revenue that they are not allowed to have on hand. A lot of the smaller systems in the state, basically, if they have a pump failure, they don't have cash on hand to repair that. And it really puts them in a bad way to try to get their system back up and running in a reasonable period of time. So we sat down with the Public Service Commission and we looked at the rate, particularly the rate-making process, and we had an agreement behind closed doors, and then when it went to the Senate and the House side of the legislature, they reneged on the deal that we came up with. So this past summer, Rural Water decided that we would take another route, and then we got the endorsement of the Municipal League and MWQA, and we did a study with all the states in the United States, the lower 48, and we found that only 7 of the lower 48 states have any regulation at all by the Public Service Commission. 41 of them have no oversight at all. And all of their issues are resolved through the judicial process. So West Virginia hired a law firm to do a study on that. We presented that to the Senate Speaker this summer, probably July, maybe early August. Met with the Speaker of the House, and he's interested in bringing that to the floor this legislative session. Couldn't happen at a better time. As most of you know, the political winds have changed. We think the groundwork has been laid, and we think we're going to be very successful when we ask for the total deregulation of the public utilities, water and wastewater. That's under the umbrella of the Public Service Commission. So I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot about that in the future, particularly this legislative session that goes on. And we would ask that if you have an opportunity to speak to your legislature, ask them to endorse this effort that we're trying to do. We think it's only going to enhance our efforts as a utility to better serve the people, our customers, and our citizens. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Landis.
Tom, you said total deregulation is what it's saying.
For public water and wastewater utilities, yes. We know we're going to have to negotiate back from that, but we started at the top and we're going to work backwards.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Was that called source water safety?
Source water protection.
Protection.
Mhm.
Okay. I knew a few people that wanted to do that, but go to that. But we didn't have enough information to even know what to ask when we go out there. Is there any kind of a guideline or anything that we're supposed to look at? So okay, that's okay to know if we're upset with anything. We don't know if we can be upset with anything. We don't know what the rules are. And number 2 is that was out at the Armory, wasn't it?
That's correct.
And some of us, including myself, that was kind of hard to walk there, you know. And unless we're going to have transportation, can we have those in the city?
Yes, we actually can. We did it out there first because it's a much larger area, space, instead of having everybody crammed in here. And we got complaints on the opposite side, Mr. Reese, that we always have them here, and there's not enough room, and people can't come in from
Was
the
it
county
crowded?
in here.
No.
Okay.
It wasn't crowded, but we were in a smaller room. We didn't have the big space. Now, what we intend to do with these meetings is not only have them there, here, but we also want to have them, because this is actually affects all of Upshur
Right.
County. So we're not going to have them everywhere. The next meeting will be here, and we will make the
Is that one in
announcement for it. That would be February.
Late February, early March.
Yes, we haven't established an exact date yet. So we'll not only be doing that, Mr. Reese, but for those that can't walk here, we will also be making them go, we'll be going out to Tennerton or out towards southern Upshur County for those that can walk there. So thank you for that answer, that question. And actually, these are actually educational. You're not really, if you want to take a look at what he's speaking of in our packets, you can pull it up on the internet, and it will also give you that information.
It's on the
if
on
you
webpage,
have access.
Buckhannon
Yes.
webpage.
And we also have that also on our own, very own website, so. Any other questions from Mr. Landis or comments?
But, Tim, if you want to get started walking now, we're going to have one in Arlington.
It's cold.
And
Very interesting.
just one more thing, and if anybody has any questions or, you know, really more in-depth questions, if you need transportation, I'm always available, okay?
Thank you.
And I would recommend that even some of our city residents to go out to the, when we go out to the country, I call it, to have these meetings, go out there and listen to their concerns, because it's all going to be a learning process. And I was a little disappointed because Kelly, you did a great job presenting at that presentation that night, and it was very educational. And I'm a member of the water board, and I don't know what they were talking about either, but I'm learning.
I'm curious.
Yeah, and that's good. And Mr. Tom will be glad to give you a tour and educate you as much as he can over there. So feel free to contact him.
And all of our board meetings are open too.
Yeah,
And they're on the third.
we meet, the water board meets the second Thursday
Second Thursday of every month,
at 4,
in here.
right in here.
And Tom, I would concur that you did a great job that night on the
Yeah.
presentation, and it's a learning process for us all. And we mustn't forget that the Buckhannon Water Department does not just serve the city of Buckhannon, it serves to the PSDs. So really, when you're out in Elkin, or out at the Elkins PSD, the Tennerton PSD, you're drinking Buckhannon water. So thank you for that.
One more thing.
Yes, well-
I have friends that come and visit here, and they're amazed at our water, and I visit them and I'm disgusted with their water. I mean, we really have good water, so keep up the good work. I like to make sure it stays
Thank
that
you for
way.
saying that, and
Thank
actually,
you.
we've won consecutive awards from the Municipal Rural Water Association.
West Virginia Rural Water
West
Association
Virginia
Annual
Rural Water.
Conference.
Yeah, everybody that comes here.
Best
comes
drinking water.
Best tasting water,
Best
right?
tasting
Water quality.
I had a question over here from this man. How can I help you, sir?
Hi, we have a Boy Scout group
see
here
that.
tonight, and one of my younger scouts, we're wondering, in a layman's, very, very basic layman's terms, what it would mean to deregulate the water. Would it mean that the
I'm
government,
sorry. Sure.
that the government wouldn't be in control of hiring people to take care of the water? I don't want to make the meeting go, just a quick explanation for the.
The federal
boys.
government, the environmental, particularly the Environmental Protection Agency, looks after the consumers in the food industry, the drinking water, anything that we consume as a person, and that's
government
regulated by
agency.
the federal government.
Okay.
And then that's passed on to the state. The state can have control of that if they meet federal guidelines, a minimum of federal. So what it means, the regulation of a public service commission, is the state of West Virginia set up an oversight group that oversees and administers the rulemaking for water and wastewater utilities in the state of West Virginia. And they ensure they protect the consumer's interest in the product that we produce.
Okay. And that
Is that layman enough?
And that would be deregulated more if this.
Yeah, so we're asking for a total deregulation
Yeah.
of that because of the
From
time constraints to
From the
get.
federal standpoint, you mean, from the federal?
From the
to
state, from the
Oh, from the
state,
state, okay.
Mainly because of the time period it takes to get something through the process.
Okay, so the counties would be in charge of their own water
Yeah,
supplies?
it brings
basically.
local ownership to the
Okay.
utility. That's correct.
Thanks.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
And that's a very great question. To bring it down to easier terms, when you go to drink your water, there's a lot of people that say how we should make sure that that water is safe for you. And it starts from president and your Congress down to the state to us. Unfortunately, what we're finding as some smaller municipalities, I don't know if you're familiar with like Charleston, who's a very big city, that they have a lot of things that they have to do that protect all of their citizens a whole lot. But we're a much smaller community, and as a much smaller community, we may not or should not have to fulfill or do some of the things that we think that they say we should have to do because we're not as big as they are. So, thank you very much, and that was a very good question, so we appreciate that. Tom, thank you again for your inputs, and we appreciate the work that you do, and please tell your crews Merry Christmas and Happy New Year if we don't see them from our city council. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Rock? I mean, for Mr. Landis? I'm looking ahead. You were fast, Tim. Mr. Rock from our Sanitation Sewer Department, sir.
Good evening. I just wanted to update you on us purchasing the CSX Railroad right away out on the Western Road. We have received a purchase sale agreement. We are actively surveying that now. So we're very close to preparing a deed and purchasing that property to extend sewer out the Western Road. Speaking of regulatory agencies, we are appealing our NPDES permit, and we have received word that our appeal has been denied, and we are moving on with that appeal. We think that we have further recourse to go on this. I think at the last meeting, I think I told you all that that the state is planning on a storm drain project up on in front of McDonald's and in that area, and that's going to tie into the city's Tucker Street storm sewer. And I think Mr. Thomas asked me for a cost estimate, and we have prepared that cost estimate. It's 400 feet of 18-inch storm sewer, including pavement repair. We have an estimate of about $48,000 to do that job. And again, I think the city would, we think that we would be smart to get that done before the state does their end, because when they tie their drains into our drains, we anticipate problems if we don't upgrade. Our line crews are working and finishing up 2 jobs. We're on Franklin Street where we're upgrading a line down there, and we're just about done. Weather's always a factor when you're digging in the ground. And the Mark Avenue job is, the pipe laying part's done. None of the surface restoration will probably happen till the sun shines, which we haven't seen for a while. And our plant crews are very actively working on the grit project, the grit separating project, to complete that before it gets too bad. And that's really all I have.
Do we have any questions or comments for Mr. Rock? Sir?
I do. Jim on the.
Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
When you say you were looking at further process in regard to the denial, do you think that will eventually have to be litigated at some point?
It could go that far. We do have we have a lawyer for aqua law, which is a prominent lawyer in this field, and they're very confident that we won't go that far. In fact, we're talking about legislation as well to help deal with this issue. We think we have a very strong point here, and so So we're pursuing that first. We hope it doesn't go that far.
Does a municipal league get involved in this at all with some of their other?
Well, the Water Quality Association is involved in this.
Anything else, Mr. Thomas?
No, that's it.
Mr. Pugh?
Yeah, Tim, are there projects being thought of, or anything on between up and around Barber Street, particularly the alleyways that run parallel to Florida Street and Ritchie Street? Are there any sewer projects planned for that area?
Sanitary or storm are we speaking? Which one?
I just heard that there was a sewer project going to be going through there, and I hadn't heard anything about it.
Okay, now there was one planned on Fayette Street, if that's the one you're talking about.
Was it that close to that area?
Yeah, Fayette Street, but we figured out another, we were talking about one house that had a problem. We thought we were gonna have to extend
Okay.
sewer a long ways, but we found another way to deal with that, and we did just finish that project not very
I
long.
had a neighbor that was asking about the alley that he lives there, and he wanted to do some work near his property line, but he didn't want to do anything until there was going to be a sewer project through there, and I hadn't heard anything.
There isn't anything that I know of
Good.
up near your way. No.
Good. Keep that.
Mr. Reese?
May I ask for, in a nutshell and in layman's terms, what the MPDS litigation is?
It's going to be hard to do in a nutshell, but I'll
Okay.
try.
Well, I can ask
Okay. The DEP is putting requirements on the sewer plant based on 1980 models, what we can discharge into the river. And this is all based on what impact you're having on the river.
Okay.
And our studies have said if you go down the river from the Buckhannon sewer plant that we're having minimal, if any, impact. You go down, there's fish, there's vegetation, and we've had our own engineer, environmental engineer to come and do studies on the river who say that we're meeting all the requirements that the DEP is imposing on us, but they're imposing limits that are based on 1980 models, and they're saying that we have to do these limits that could require the city of Buckhannon to spend millions of dollars to upgrade the sewer plant to get very minimal effects in the river, which means
I
the
understand.
citizens pay for.
I understand what it is, I just didn't know what it was about, I do now.
Yes, and I would like to make one other comment about the PSC, maybe for the young man there. I think the biggest thing about the PSC is they regulate how much money we can make. And I don't know whether you all are aware of this, but we are a business. I mean, the sewer and the water is a business. It's not taxes, it's not anything else. We make our money from the services we provide. So the PSC tells us that we can't keep money in reserve. Well, if we have a pump go down to a pump station, it can cost $30,000, it can cost $50,000, and we're not allowed to have enough money to keep a pump on hand to upgrade our systems. And that's one of our biggest complaints about the PSC. We don't resist the PSC protecting folks from being abused by utility companies. That's not the issue. The issue is that they won't let us run a business like a business. And that's basically what we're looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Rock. And when he says PSC, Public Service Commission.
Yes.
And it's designed to protect the citizens that use the services that these companies provide. And unfortunately, it's gotten to a point that even though we actually do the best job we can and that we want to be able to expand our services, we are become limited by this organization or this governmental body, so to speak, that we cannot provide or try to enhance what we already have. So, thank you, Mr. Rock, for that. Is there any other questions or
One
comments?
final.
Yes, Mr. Reese, please.
Well, I haven't just been on the planning commission for a very short time, looking at the 2020 plan. One of the things was, included by 2020, was to try to bring electrical service underground and wherever we could. Okay. I was wondering, had any thought been put into the Kanawha Street project with, that's very unsightly anyway, since they're going to have it torn up, had any thought been given into partially submerging electrical wiring there?
Well, as much as I'd like to really address that in the sanitation department part, we can't do that. What we are attempting to do is any new developments that come along, we are looking at as they try to remodel or whatever, is there a way for us to be able to do the electrical services you're talking about? But again, we're talking quite a bit of an investment for not only the city, but the electrical companies to do so. Unfortunately, from 100 and some odd years of always putting them overhead, the only way we can do it is as development goes, without disrupting everyone's service. So we try to limit as much as that as possible. Mr. Rock, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Rock? Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Mr. McCauley, we have a discussion on Angus lawsuit.
I have several updates. In your packet, you have the cover letter as well as the full and final release that was executed by Mrs. Angus on the slip and fall case that was filed, I guess about a year ago against the city. And you can read about the terms that are contained in the release. Essentially, our insurance carrier paid $5,000 to make the case go away, and that amount was matched by Mr. Bax's insurance carrier. So the case is resolved as a matter of law, although the dismissal order has yet to be entered when I checked with the court. So that should be done just about any time. And we'll get you a copy of the dismissal order as that's received. The Drug Task Force folks, I'm glad that Chief Gregory is still here. I had another investigators meeting. Did he leave? Well, I was going to let him tell you all about how productive that was and what wonderful input that was shared between the 4 police agencies, and to also let him tell you about the mutual aid agreement, which you have in your packet tonight. This may not end up being the final draft, and I don't want to be so presumptuous as to speak for all 4 agencies, including the Upshur County Commission, the City of Weston, and the Lewis County Commission. We had to start somewhere, and I took some, it was more than an outline, but maybe about a half-baked agreement that Matt had come up with, and added the necessary legalese to really make us highfalutin, right? And you have in your packet tonight what could end up being a draft that would soon be circulated among the 4 entities, that is the City of Buckhannon, Upshur County Commission, City of Weston, and Lewis County Commission. I would also remind the council that the next investigators meeting will be in January. That'll be the 3rd meeting since our seminal meeting in October of the possible Drug Task Force partners. And then on February 2, Groundhog Day, Bill Ehlenfeld will be back here again from Wheeling to coordinate the next big meeting of all of the entities coming together again. So that'll be here before you know it. And I think things continue to look very exciting and promising as we hopefully evolve to forming a drug task force. I don't know if you all heard on the news this evening, there was another $250,000 allocation made to the Harrison County partners, $100,000 going to each of the cities of Clarksburg and Bridgeport, and $50,000 to the local state police detachment up there, all so that they can invest in additional overtime payment, procurement of additional vehicles, equipment for the investigation of drugs and violent crimes. So that's, we're certainly not looking at forming a drug task force in Buckhannon to make it a money-making project. I want to be sure that everybody's aware of that. But if as a consequence of this effort, we end up getting into the pocketbooks of those who are engaged in the illicit activities, seizing those properties, realizing the sale of those properties and the seizure of those funds that are garnered from illicit drug sales, and it's allowed to come back and help our police agencies, well, why not, right? So that's some update there about that one. On the Suddenlink front, I've got some good news and some bad news. First, we learned, I believe it was just earlier this week, Monday or Tuesday, that there had been another breach at the top of the hill, at Cemetery Hill. A lock on a gate was not re-locked by apparently one of the Suddenlink officials that was up there. There've been a volley of emails and phone calls and meetings in the last 3 or 4 days since that was discovered. And basically, what is coming down the pike, and I think it's going to happen sooner than later, is that there will be separate gates installed at the top of Cemetery Hill. In fact, that work may have started as early as today, with separate blocks. In other words, that roughly 2,000 square feet that is where the Suddenlink stuff is located will be separately accessible from the city's water tank site, which is a good thing. And probably maybe something that we should have looked at prior to now as a practical matter, just to avoid these kind of issues. So something good, I think, is going to come out of something bad. And they've also asked for about another, I wish Mr. Holland was here, maybe an extra 200 square feet over and above what had been identified as their property to be leased prior to that, which opened up the opportunity for us to at least begin a discussion to exact more money from Suddenlink as part of the leasing of a portion of Cemetery Hill. And the amount that we're kind of working with right now would be an annual lease amount of about $10 per square foot. And if that ends up being a 2,000 square foot area, or maybe a little bit more, you can do the math pretty quickly, and it's going to be somewhere in that $20,000 to $22,000 a year range, which is nearly double what we had talked about before as far as leasing of Cemetery Hill by Suddenlink. So more to follow on that. We're still working on the primary terms of the lease agreement, and in any event, a couple of inquiries have been made about the Suddenlink franchise renewal process, and gee, do we have to even renew Suddenlink's franchise at all? And in short, the answer is yes. The city of Buckhannon cannot fail to renew Suddenlink's franchise. The only authorizing, well, there's actually two. If we could show, and I don't think there's any indication of any of this, that there is some sort of fraud going on with the rates they charge and those kinds of things. The only other thing that you can do to not renew a franchise is if they fail to hit certain technical marks that are set by the Federal Communications Commission. And Suddenlink does these weekly tests that we have the opportunity to audit and look at, and they're clearly well within their technical requirements. Now, does that mean that Suddenlink is the only show in town? Well, as you know, going all the way back to the spring of '83, one of the things I've been more intensely involved with in my coming up on 32 years with the city is following the TV cable scene. It was something that I got dragged into way back, and have continued to try to stay as current as possible with these things. TV cable was deregulated in 1984. Since 1984, the United States government has disallowed the local regulation of rates and programming. Barry Goldwater was actually the leader of that charge, and he's been dead for nearly 30 years, so that tells you how long ago that effort occurred to deregulate TV cable. As a consequence of that, the trade-off was that municipalities were given this opportunity to automatically collect 5% of the gross revenues of the TV cable provider. Back in 1983, that amount was just a few $1,000s a year, maybe $10,000 a year. Now that amount is more in the $160,000 a year range. I would say a couple of things have influenced that number being fairly stable. Suddenlink loses customers all the time. Understand that the TV cable industry is fast approaching that of being a dinosaur. There are new ways of delivering the whole telecommunications package. Peter Brown would not like me telling you this, but it's the fact of the matter. They have lesser customers, quantity-wise, so they charge more per customer to keep their revenues fairly constant. The move is clearly in the direction of satellite providers and internet providers relative to television cable services. We do not have the opportunity as a city to tap into a 5% kind of a charge to DirecTV or Dish TV because they're not using the city street right-of-ways and sidewalks and alleys to string wire. So there's that. The other question that is occasionally posed is, why doesn't the city of Buckhannon do what the city of Philippi did roughly 30 years ago, back in 1985-86, the same time we were preparing to litigate with the cable company? The city of Philippi decided to establish its own TV cable system. We did a feasibility study back in 1986. If you go look at the minutes of the TV cable board meeting and all that stuff, it's all in there. And there was a projected cost in 1986 to the city of Buckhannon, the capital upstart. And this didn't include installation and all this other stuff that would have been manpower related to get the lines up. It was going to be a $3 million startup in 1986. That was before we had fiber optic going essentially down the streets. Fiber is much more expensive than coax. So to start a cable company like what they have in Philippi right now in the city of Buckhannon, forget Upshur County, this would just be in the corporate limits. I would guess you'd be talking somewhere, and this is a real wide, $15 to $20 million investment to start your own cable company. And that's something that some project in 10 to 15 years is an industry that will cease to be. So I could not recommend what I in fact recommended back in 1985, that we do our own system. I can't recommend that to you as we look at entering 2015. So I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you have about TV cable. I think also, if you recall, we used to have 7 to 10 year franchises with the cable company. The cable company asked for a 5-year term last time. I think that was indicative of what they thought was going to happen within their own industry. And we're working with the 5-year period as we negotiate this new franchise term as well.
Thank you, Mr. Cobb.
Yes, Ron.
If we go ahead and charge the Sudden Link $20,000
For the lease?
for the lease, yeah, okay. Now, Mr. Atkins back there from Sudden Link, sitting in the back of the room. Could you answer, Steve, is that likely to result in an increase to our consumers?
You're a citizen, Ron. I live in Buckhannon as well.
Okay.
All of a sudden.
Okay, is it?
I mean,
Do you know?
if it's a cost of doing business, what do we do as a city? If city employee insurance rates go up, if the cost of treating water goes up, those costs ultimately, it's not something that happens overnight, but we watch those costs very carefully, and when it becomes unmanageable, we're going to look at compromising services. If we don't have more money, clearly rates go up.
Okay.
And I think you would see that. I'm not speaking for Sudden Link, mind you, but it's just a classic business model. The more that would be exacted from them, the more that customers would pay.
To me, it seems like it's a very, very minute amount for us, $20,000. But for the citizens out there, if they have a possibility of our seniors that are on fixed income of another $2-3 a month increase because of this $20,000, it would seem to me that as a councilman, I might recommend that we lower that sum in order to protect the citizens, not as a penalty towards Sudden Link or anybody else that might come into that situation. Just a thought.
I hear exactly what you're saying.
Makes sense.
I don't disagree with that.
David, I think you gave an excellent summarization of what the history has been with Suddenlink and the cable board and so forth. And, one of the other issues really long-term is content is king today. And, all the distribution systems have problem with negotiating or renegotiating their contracts with, whether it's Disney or ESPN or what have you. And that's one of the real cost drivers of this whole market today.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Mary. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley, for explaining the history of that, because I've been asked that, and it's been posted out there, so I suggested the individual write a letter to the mayor, but you've given an excellent description of why we don't provide as a city like Philippi does, because they own their own and we don't.
Even before we formalize things, and to my knowledge, Buckhannon is the only municipal corporation in the state that has its own TV cable board. I know that sometimes there are gripes registered that why doesn't this body meet more often? Well, nobody else in the state, not even Charleston or Wheeling or Huntington, the big cities don't have a TV cable board. We're the only show in town that does that. That speaks a little bit to how serious we've taken our TV cable, I think, in Buckhannon. To my knowledge, we're the only municipal corporation that has litigated. I tried a case in federal district court back in 1987, 88 against the cable company, and nobody else does that in West Virginia. So we've been pretty serious about it. But just a quick story. I think it was the fall of '85. We went up to Philippi, and when I say we, it was then recently. It wasn't Bill Short. I'm misspeaking because it was after Jim Carpenter became mayor. So it was Jim Carpenter and Binky Poundstone, then city recorder, and myself. Chris Shea had been identified as one of the first members of the TV cable board, and we met Joe Metalliano, who was the city manager of Philippi, at Philippi City Hall, and he drove us up this godforsaken hill where they had their head end for their TV cable. And we went up there and we looked at it and was okay, that's really neat. And I go to leave and my car was stuck in a hole. I drove this minivan up there and I've got all these Philippi and Buckhannon officials in there. And Harley Brown and Jim Carpenter and Joe Metalliano had to get out of the car and rock my car to get it out of a hole that I had backed into in the process of going to the top of this hill. But anyway, we did a lot of work back then to look at trying to do what was best for the community with TV cable. There was this pioneer out of Tionesta, Pennsylvania, Jack Fjord, who rode in on a white horse and promised all kinds of things. And he said it would take a year to put in the new system. It took him 6 months. There was a ceremonial hitting of the switch. Everybody went home, and at noon on a particular day, we went from this horrible 9-channel service to 26 channels with ESPN and the Weather Channel and all these other things. The only problem that came out of that was they didn't have the right filter to keep the Playboy Channel from coming in, and for 2 days everybody in Buckhannon had free Playboy Channel. And I think 9 months later was the biggest population and increase in Buckhannon history happened about 9 months later. Anyway, that's my story.
You're sticking
I need to
to
start
it.
writing this stuff down. You can't make it up. Yeah, a couple of other real quick updates, and then I'll wait until you get into your new business. There's going to be another wave of ordinances coming very soon. There is a March meeting of the Home Rule Board coming. And understand that not all ordinances, but those things that have been identified as planks in the city's home rule plan, and right now there are 4 of them. Could be more in the future, but right now there are 4 planks, if you will, in the Buckhannon home rule plan. Mr. Doss would like to see us have at least a couple of those ordinances ready by the 1st of March. Now, they're going to look at the ordinance first. It's not one of these things, you all will get the draft as well, but they would have to approve it, and then it would come back to council, and then we would go through our regular ordinance process. But we'd really like to have at least a couple of those 4 planks started. when the home rule convenes in March. I warned you a couple of 3 meetings ago that there would be a wave of ordinances. You have 4 of them tonight, and there's going to be another 6, 8, 10 of them coming on down the pike in the weeks to come. I think that's all I have, unless you all have questions for me.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. McCauley? I do have a couple of comments. First of all, I want to make sure that everyone understands that suddenly there was an encroachment. It's not the first one, but we have a great partnership with Sudden Lake, particularly within our departments. If there is an issue, they alert us almost immediately. In this case, it happened to be a couple of personnel that didn't fulfill their part, their job. But as soon as we were able to recognize it, we want to let the citizens know that the city is always on top of any security issues, and our water towers being one of the major ones, according to Homeland Security and, of course, the city of Buckhannon. As soon as we recognized it, I do want to make sure you understand that Sudden Lake jumped on it immediately and tried to help us resolve the issue. We have been able to resolve the issue by having a fence built, as Mr. McCauley alluded to, around their piece of property so that there's no longer an issue dealing with our water storage tanks. But I do want to let you know that even though we can't necessarily regulate or do anything with Sudden Lake when it comes to our franchise agreement, I have listened and I have been requested, and I shall fulfill the requirement to have a cable board meeting in January. We're looking at towards the end of January as some of our things get resolved and everybody gets back from their holiday season. So having said that, I do want to make the announcement that we're going to have that. It will be in the paper, and I would invite any members of the citizenry, including citizens of Buckhannon, to come to that meeting and learn a little bit more of how the cable franchise agreement works. And how our board may or may not be able to actually do much when it comes to any ordinance changing to the agreements we have and the franchise agreement. We have 6 months, as we'll discuss here in a little bit, and that's just maybe one of another one we may have. And I really don't want to defer off into all the details of what that board does. If you're interested, you're more than welcome to take a look on the city website or call the City of Buckhannon City Hall, and we'll be more than happy to get you that information. Moving on from there, we have our correspondence. We have the Zoning Board of Appeals in your packet, letter of interest. We have a Mr. Raymond Hall. I'd ask that each of you take a look at that real quick. And let's see, do we have him later down here as well for an appointment? I would entertain a motion after you read that, if you would so desire to appoint. We really do need to get somebody on our Zoning Board of Appeals. Entertain a motion to appoint Mr. Raymond Hall as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Does anybody know Mr. Hall?
Yes, I make that motion.
All right, Mary Albaugh makes the motion. Do I have a second? We can have a discussion in a moment.
Second.
All right, I have a second by Mr. Pugh. Discussion.
Does anybody know Mr. Hall?
Can you tell us a little bit about Mr. Hall?
He's a veteran. He's retired from working in the gas and oil industry. Lives in North Buckhannon. He's, pays attention to what's going on with the city because he watches it at home. He attends he has attended in the past many city council meetings just as somebody who comes and observes. I particularly think he's a good candidate with his background, and he's very knowledgeable and can learn things. I've shared with him what I knew as a person who served on the Zoning Board of Appeals and the procedures. I didn't think it would be a problem, and so I asked him to submit his name when he was ready, and so he did.
Is that the only vacancy on that board?
No, there is one more vacancy.
One more vacancy for the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Yes, ma'am. And I would remind council that normally we don't ask for background checks or anything when it comes to these appointments, unless you know of a reason why somebody should not sit on that board. There's really no reason not to allow this unless we don't have any vacancies. But of course, I can't speak on behalf of the council. I can just tell you previously the historical perspective from that. So I have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion on this?
Call for the president.
All right, I have a call for the question by Mr. Pugh. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Congratulate, and we'll make sure that Mr. Hall gets his letter notifying him. All right, we have a notice of the public hearings, ordinance 385, 386, and 387 in your packets. These are, for the audience sake, these are what we discussed at the beginning of the meeting, and these are actually what we put in the newspaper so everyone in the city or in the county can come and address any of the issues that we were going to discuss at the public hearing. The other thing we have in here is our official oath of office from our very newest city council member, Robin Riggs Simons, and we congratulate her to on board and welcome her on board our council, and thank you for submitting your name and actually accepting the nomination.
Thank you. It's my honor to be here.
Thank you so much. All right, now we have our consent agenda. In your packets, you have the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of the December 4th, 2014 meeting, approval of the building and the wiring permits, approval of the payment of the bills, approval of the creation or / advertisement of building and code enforcement officer, we discussed before, approval of advertisement for statement of qualifications for a city attorney, and appointment of Councilwoman Robin Riggs Simons to the Waste Board.
I move they be accepted.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a second. Any discussion on any of those? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. Do we need anything removed? Well, no, we would have done that just a minute ago. I don't know why that's even there. We'll get rid of that. We have strategic issues for discussion and vote. We have the second and final reading of ordinance 385, the comprehensive plan. I will defer to Mr. McCauley as he does his thing.
I'm not going to read all this again because I went over it in great detail 2 meetings ago and then the first reading last time, but we are required to read it by caption. This is ordinance number 385 of the city of Buckhannon, an ordinance adopting the city's comprehensive plan pursuant to Chapter 8A, Article 3, Section 1 et sec of the West Virginia Code as amended. You have conducted the necessary public hearing at the outset of this meeting. There was a Class 2 legal advertisement in the Buckhannon Record Delta the past 2 weeks, all of which satisfies the state code requirements. The only thing I would note is that upon its effectuation, if you pass this on second reading tonight, that means just prior to January 18, when this goes into effect, we are supposed to deliver a certified copy of the comprehensive plan to both the Upshur County Clerk's Office as well as to the appropriate office with the state of West Virginia to show that we've done what the state law requires, and that anybody in the world that wants to see our comprehensive plan, they can either come to City Hall and look at it, or they can go to the county clerk's office and look at it. So it's my recommendation that the council approve on the second and final reading ordinance 385 of the city of Buckhannon.
All right, I would entertain a motion to approve the second and final reading of ordinance 385, the Buckhannon 2020 comprehensive plan. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All right. I have a second by Mrs. Albaugh. Any discussion? I would say, actually, I would say that I'm very proud to say that we have our comprehensive plan in place, the Buckhannon 2020, with the work of many people, and I'm glad to see that put to bed, and as we continue down the road with this living document, to see the things that we do and progress from there. So that was a discussion, and have a call for question from Mr. Pugh. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I have Mr. McCauley, the second and final reading of ordinance 386, the zoning ADS property.
Again, there was a legal advertisement concerning 386 in the paper. The notice was posted in the foyer at City Hall. You had conducted your required public hearing at the outset of the meeting, so this is fully mature for the council to take up on the second and final reading. This is ordinance number 386 of the city of Buckhannon, an ordinance amending zoning ordinance number 244 of the city of Buckhannon by rezoning all of the real estate, that is 5.4 acres, annexed into the corporate limits of Buckhannon in July of 2014 from R1, single-family residential district, to industrial district. Mr. Edwards, it's my recommendation that the council consider and approve ordinance 386 on the second and final reading.
To consider upon maturation of the second and final reading of ordinance 386, I would entertain a motion for the zoning of the ADS property.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Pugh, second by Mr. Thomas. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. McCauley, we're now moving on to the second and final reading of ordinance 387, the college zone repeal.
This is another ordinance that, because of it being planning, zoning related, required a public hearing at the outset of this evening's meeting, which was conducted. Also, a legal advertisement in the paper and the appropriate posting of the legal notice in the foyer at City Hall. This is the second of two, and this is the final reading of ordinance number 387 of the City of Buckhannon, an ordinance amending zoning ordinances number 244 and 383 of the City of Buckhannon by repealing the college district. This matter is mature for your consideration, and I recommend to the council that you approve it accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. I will entertain a motion for the second and final reading of ordinance 387, the college zone repeal.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Alba. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kabari. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. McCauley, second and final reading of ordinance 388, employee longevity.
Now, some folks may say, well, they screwed up. They didn't have a public hearing on this. We don't have to on this particular ordinance. Only certain ordinances require public hearings. And if you looked at the record delta real carefully the last week or two, there also was not a notice relative to the adoption of ordinance 388. This is an employee compensation matter that does not require either a legal notice in the paper nor a public hearing, but it's still mature for the council's consideration this evening on the second and final reading. This is ordinance number 388 of the City of Buckhannon, an ordinance authorizing the payment of longevity pay for full-time municipal employees of the city, including the employees of all four of the city's utility boards. The matter is mature for the council's consideration, and it's my recommendation that you consider and approve this on second reading this evening.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. I will entertain a motion for the second and final reading of ordinance 388, employee longevity.
I'll make that motion.
Mrs. Kupari makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Alba has the second. Any discussion?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Pugh.
I noticed that item B of section 1, section B, Article 1, anyway, there is no mention in here of making this payment to them, as was promised to me, that it shall be made the pay period following the last pay period in the month of May each year. As you all know, I have been opposed to having anything that comes close to being paid in around December or January for certain reasons. I took good word that would be inserted into this ordinance, that there would be a definite date to pay this, and I respectfully ask my fellow council members to vote against this ordinance until it is inserted that it shall be paid the second pay period, after the second pay period in May.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. And you're right in observing that. It is not as a matter of that, but we do take that as under advisement. I have a motion and
I have a comment.
Mr. Thomas,
also.
please.
I had asked Amby, I think it was the last meeting, Amby, how many people that we would consider long-term, part-time people. And I forget what her response was. I think there's several, but I've been involved in organizations where part-time people are very critical to support the overall organization, the employer. And I think that we'd be remiss if we didn't consider that also. I mean, you know, maybe that's not a process that we don't consider part-time people they're not long-term, but you know, I've dealt with part-time people before. Organizations have been there for 20 years, and they're an instrumental part of the of the employment picture. So I just wanted to I threw it out last time, and, you know, I guess this ordinance can be amended at any time, David?
Absolutely.
In the future?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and.
It's a work in process and such?
Understand, I absolutely unequivocally was not directed by the council to make any amendment at the last meeting. Mr. Pugh may have had an expectation, but there was no instruction given to me whatsoever about that.
No,
Let me
sir,
s-
it wasn't from you.
Let me say this, though. It's up to the council to do this every year. If you want to do, this doesn't give one penny to any employee. If you all decide, as you go through your budgeting process, that's more intense in February than any time else of the year, that, look, as of May 1st, we're going to give these longevity pay raises this year, you can do that. That's up to the council. Now, on a day-to-day administration basis or month-to-month kind of a thing, there's also an opportunity for Mr. Doss and the council to do administrative rules and regulations for the purpose of administering this ordinance. So as we envision this going forward, it's difficult to imagine every single little administrative detail that could come up relative to it. That's the reason that you've got that flexibility that's built into the ordinance that we often do with these administrative type ordinances.
Would it be better to look at this conceptually in the sense, David, that this is something that we believe in, that, you know, at some point in time we can say, well, we're going to include part-time? You don't have to.
You could absolutely, this could be amended as you go through the budget process in February, and you could say, you know, we'd like to give the full-time folks this amount that's set forth in this ordinance, but we also feel strongly now about the part-time folks, and let's get on amending this ordinance to bring them into the fold too. In a matter of 2 council meetings, you could amend the ordinance, and 30 days thereafter put it into effect. Absolutely.
And Ron, regarding your question, is that I don't feel real comfortable putting May as a date. I'd like to have it open-ended.
I'd agree with that. Thank you for that, gentlemen. I'll take that under advisement. But, and normally I wouldn't open the discussion up besides the people that are voting on it, but Mr. Reese is very antsy to make a point.
I just have been thinking about this over the last few weeks. As the council is going to approve this from year to year, let's say you've done it 6 years in a row, and then there's a little bit of a itsy bitsy, are you going to be able to say no? Okay, now, and then we're looking at, I asked last time how many city employees that would be affected, and it said approximately 90. So we're looking at about $23,000 to $32,000 each time, somewhere in between. And I wondered if it might not be budget, because I wondered if it's coming up there, and you know, it's a political year, and you're thinking, is this potential of being that you decide can be politicized to say well, we might not put this project because I want to make sure we get that longevity budget in this year. The fact that it's non-budgeted and up to you, does that leave it open to politicization?
And only if you want to use it for politicization. Fact. And if anybody wants to do that,
I'm philosophically
discourage
in favor
that.
of it.
I understand that, and we're not in a philosophical discussion here. What I would like to do is take your comments under advisement, but normally we don't open it, but in this case, I was generous on that. What I do have is a continuing discussion amongst the council members, Mr. Pugh.
Yes. As everyone here probably in the audience and on council knows, that the reason I opposed it was that it was originally planned to be made in December or January. And I still believe that it was and is a ploy to get around payment of bonuses for Christmas, which have been deemed to be illegal by the state tax department and the state of West Virginia's auditor office. I agreed, talking to Mr. Mayor, that if the date was changed to a set date in the year, so we know it was going to be paid at a certain date every year, that I would support that heartily. And since that wasn't put in here, I can't support this at all anymore.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Pugh. Any other discussions or comments on that?
I just want to say that, thank you, and thank you, Ron. But we've discussed this and we've beat it to death back and forth, and we've all were given an opportunity to voice our opinions back and forth, and we voted on it.
Yes.
Now, this is the second reading of it.
It is.
I suggest we move forward or call for the,
You're
whatever
calling for
you
a question? I
call
have
for
a
the
call
question.
for question from Mrs. Alba. I'm gonna ask for a roll call vote on this.
Thank you.
And Amby, if you will call the roll, please.
Okay. Dave Thomas,
No.
Pam Capari,
Yes.
Mary Albaugh,
Yes.
Ron Pugh,
No.
Robin Simons,
No.
and Rick.
Yes. That's a tie. As a tie, no decisions are made, it can be brought back to the table again. Moving on from there, we have resolution 2014-19, 6-month extension to the current TV cable franchise agreement. It's in your packet, or was that actually, yeah, it's in your packet. Mr. McCauley, would you like to review that for us real quick?
Mr. Edwards, this is not a franchise renewal. It is a 6-month extension
I'm sorry.
to the existing cable franchise. But as we get closer to, it could happen as early as March perhaps, or April or May, there'll be another ordinance that will embody the terms of the new franchise that we'll bring back before you. This just buys us additional time to address these lease issues and some of the other stuff that more recently has come up in the TV cable relationship. So, give this a quick. Okay. Maybe. Resolution number 2014-19 of the Council of the City of Buckhannon providing for a 6-month extension to the current TV cable franchise agreement with Sequel 3 Communications 2 LLC, a Delaware limited liability company doing business as Sudden Link Communications. I'm not going to read all those whereases again, but this franchise is scheduled to expire on December 31, 2014. We can't pull the plug on Sudden Link. What would happen on January 1 is Sudden Link could quit paying their fees to the city of Buckhannon. And you don't want that to happen. So really, this totally benefits the city to do this while we continue to negotiate the new franchise agreement. It's my strong recommendation that the council approve Resolution 2014-19.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. We have the resolution 2014-19 before you, 6-month extension to the current TV cable franchise agreement. Do I would entertain a motion to accept that.
I would so move that we accept that.
I have Mr. Pugh as a motion, I have Mr. Thomas as a second. Any discussion on that?
Call for question.
Mr. Pugh's eagerly calling for the question, and all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Motion been eager a minute ago. Remember, the next thing in your packet, we have a letter of interest from Nancy Show, wanting to serve. And here's a unique situation that we're gonna ask here in a few moments. Because of Mr. O'Neill's, actually Megan O'Neill's moving out of the city, to be a member at large, you have to be a city resident to serve on the Stockbridge Youth Board. And we have before you Mrs. Shope's interest, as she has served on this board for many years before, to return back to that board. And you'll see here in a moment, we're going to discuss an appointment to that board from City Council, and I'll go to that in a moment. I would entertain a motion to accept the appointment of Nancy Shope to the Stockbridge Youth Center Board of Directors.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Kapari. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Riggs seconds. Mrs. Simons seconds. Any discussion? All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
No.
Motion carries. I have appointment of the council member of the Stockbridge Youth Center Board. I will ask each and every one of you whether or not you would like to sit on the Stockbridge Youth Center Board. What happens is, because I was the recorder and ex officio officer recorder, as I became mayor, I now have to sit as the chairperson of that. And according to the bylaws, a member from City Council has to sit in the recorder's position. So I would entertain a motion from one or, well, actually, I don't know if we actually have to vote on it, but do any of you,
I'll offer to do it.
first Monday of every month? Well,
If
it's
nobody
been
else-
quarterly, but it's changing the first Monday of every month.
If nobody else does it, I'll do it. I just need to get it right.
I'm already on there, so I.
Pam cannot do it. And that brings up something else, that in the case that I can't be there as the mayor, let's say I have the flu or I get hit by a train or something, then Pam Kupari sits as the chairperson of that committee as the longest serving member.
Well, that's the case, and
I'd like to be on it.
So I have Mrs. Simons that would like to sit on it, and I have Mr. Thomas that would like to
Well,
sit on
Robin,
it.
if Robin wants to do it, that's fine.
We would love to
I
have
think
Mrs.
Robin
Simons
would be
on there. All right,
Yeah.
so I don't believe, well, we'll do it formally as anyway. I would entertain a motion to allow Robin to sit on the Stuckert Youth Center Board of Directors.
I would make that motion, sir.
I have Mr. Pugh.
Second.
And I have a second by Mr. Thomas. Any discussion on that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank
Welcome to
you.
Stuckert Youth Center Board of Directors. Having said that, moving on to the approval of vacancy for 2 lieutenants with the Buckhannon Fire Department. In your packet, you will have the letters of interest to the city council to approve their examination process. What will happen is, once you approve that they approve it through the fire civil service,
That's easy for you to
well,
say.
yeah, no, regulations that they are eligible, which they are, to proceed to the Fire Civil Service Commission for their approval to move on to the examination through the Fire Civil Service Commission. So I would entertain a motion from you to approve the promotional vacancies for 2 lieutenants. That would be, and actually there's a captain, but you don't need to approve that. As you can see, there's 3, and that's pretty much all of our staff. Joey Batts, J.B. Kimball, and,
Brian Elmore.
Brian Elmore.
If I don't have to say those words, like, I will move that motion.
I'll second it.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Pugh, a second by Mrs. Kopari. Any discussion on that? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. In your package, you'll have a letter of interest and, or a note of interest, and that is something that Mr. Dawson and I and Mr. Holland attended on the Interstate 79 Exit 99 at Weston project. And anybody who knows that's ever gone that way to go to Clarksburg or flip-flop, going to Clarksburg or to Charleston, that Exit 99 has got to be one of the most dangerous, badly planned kind of cloverleaf, ready for destruction type of interchange that I've ever seen in my life.
Mr. Mayor, you're being kind.
It is, well, there's some really kind words I could put into that. There were some different plans that were placed for options before the citizens to take a look at. Unfortunately, they really didn't get an opportunity to have a lot of citizens there. I would encourage you to take a look at the Department of Highways website and vote on the one that you feel would most be appropriate in your opinion. All of them are better than the one that they have now. To give yourself or give them a little bit of input. So I put that before you, I put that before the press and the citizens. Please, anybody can go on and vote for what you may think. There's 3 alternatives to that.
If you've seen the possibilities of what could happen with something like this, check up in Washington, PA, how they've made a nice interchange up there now instead of the cloverleaf they had coming around up there too.
They did, definitely had some great options that you could take a look at. The next thing I have,
What's the
and I'm gonna
deadline
pass
for
this
that?
around. Excuse me, ma'am?
What's the deadline for that voting?
They're looking in April of 2015, so the sooner you can put it in, the least you have to worry about it in your mind.
It says verbal and written comments by 9 January.
January, was it?
No,
April.
January.
By January 9th. I'm sorry, I've been corrected. January 9th of 2015, so the sooner the better.
And if you don't have a packet, you can have this.
I gotcha.
I'll get one, and it's got the website where you can vote or send an email to whoever that is.
Resolution came before.
Okay.
Is there another question? What was that, Rob?
I just have a question before y'all go to your general comments.
Yeah.
Is that good now?
Actually, I have one other announcement I want to get done before we go there, and you will be recognized. We have an interesting dilemma on our city council meetings. We have a council meeting on 1/8 scheduled that we discussed last time on January 8th. Of course, we go the 1st and 3rd. That would give us another council meeting immediately following that. So that'd be 2 council meetings in a row. What we would like to do is cancel the January 8th council meeting. Go ahead with the regular January 15th meeting, which is the second meeting that we would normally have, and then have a special session meeting, kind of like we did before with the workshop, on 1/26 before we get back on schedule with our normal 1st and 3rd Thursdays. I would ask the council to consider that at this point so that we can get it onto the schedule and make the proper announcements. Do I have any discussion on that? We're looking at the 1/8, let me repeat it, canceling the January 8th meeting, the very first week, which would put us onto the following week of January 15th as another regular council meeting. What we would like to do is cancel the 1/8 and have a special session meeting on January 26th, which would make us one of those workshops. And Mr. Doss would have an agenda for that we would announce.
Do you have a time?
We don't have a time yet, so that's always a good
Probably
thing.
6. I think it's the last one we do.
6 p.m. if that's all right with
6
everyone.
on
That is a
26.
Thursday, by the way.
We
That's
had talked about.
26th is a Monday.
Monday.
Oh,
we
it's a
also-
Monday, I'm sorry.
We also talked about having a town hall meeting. Is that?
Yes,
What day? January 8th?
January the 26th.
we have talked about having that in January. We haven't made any plans on that yet. We could actually discuss that on the 1/15 if we wanted
Would
to.
Michael would he want to have that
January
workshop
1st,
first
the
before we have a town hall meeting? or after?
That would be my suggestion.
Well, I have, just preliminarily, talk about the fire fee formula, the B&O, and everybody's wanting to know about the city's employment benefits package.
So that'd be on the 26th?
That's what I have tentatively.
Okay, then we'll have a town hall meeting in February.
Yes, sir. Once we've got educated enough to really. So I would entertain a motion then to cancel the January 8th regular meeting, well, actually our special meeting we made from last week, and schedule and maintain the January 15th meeting and add the special session workshop meeting on January 26th.
I'll make that motion.
All right, we have Mr. Thomas with the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mrs. Albaugh. Any discussion on that? Does everybody understand the dates? And we'll make sure you get the dates, and we'll make sure the press gets the
Elvis
dates
Presley's
as well.
birthday's anyway. You all should be.
Well, we need a day off.
That's a national holiday for that. Any other discussion besides that's recognized Elvis Presley holiday? All right, then we will, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Before we go to comments and announcements from the council, we have a special request from Mr. Rob Osborne to make a question or comment. Please, sir.
Just one quick question. Since the first Thursday in January, January 1st, are you all having council meeting that day?
That's what we just got through
I just want to make sure, because y'all were throwing dates around, I just want to make sure.
The previous week, in our last council meeting, we knew it was January 1st, so we couldn't have it. We made it January 8th, then the third week, and so that's what we just
Let's go
discussed.
back and forth.
No, it's going to, just for one more clarification sake, our next meeting will now be on January 15th. We will have a special meeting on January 26th. All right. All right, so we have our special comments and announcements. We'll start off with Mrs. Albaugh.
Okay. Franklin, I'll take this to the Consolidated Public Works Board. That's where we need to take things when we have citizens call and ask for special things like a street sign or whatever.
Yes.
Okay, then I'll do that. And wishing everybody a very, very Merry Christmas. And we'll see you in January.
Thank you, Mrs. Albaugh. We appreciate that. Mrs. Kapari.
Couple things. Due to the Christmas holiday next week, I was wondering if we could possibly not have ticketing downtown on Monday and Tuesday
You mean
and Wednesday.
parking?
And Wednesday.
For shopping?
For shopping, for, our small
Extended
businesses downtown.
parking?
That's a good idea.
That's a great idea.
I mean,
Great idea. What I can do, since it's not on the agenda, we can't actually make that motion or anything. But what we can do is talk with the chief and see if maybe some leniency can be sought for those days. Maybe perhaps Santa is parking his reindeer downtown and we want to make sure that he has some spaces
Well,
available.
we have very few small businesses, and I just think it would be a help for them, that people don't feel like they gotta hurry up and get back to their vehicles in 2 hours, and they've got visitors in
Can I
town.
suggest something?
Okay,
Can I suggest something?
sure.
In the past, there was leniency done with parking overtime, but blatant parking on handicap and loading zones and yellow zones, you probably want to continue that.
I would say so, yeah, I agree with
I agree
that.
with that.
We would give leniency to the chief and the police department on whether or not how they would want to force that. We can't actually, now this would have been a great thing to bring up and put into our agenda, and maybe we could have voted on that,
Well, I didn't think about it.
but that's okay. But what we can do is we can consult with the chief and ask that perhaps we have,
Well, I know there's leniency during times of homecoming and stuff that we don't discuss, but there's leniency.
I bet they're already, I would do believe that our police department would take into consideration the holiday spirit and probably not be as aggressive as they might normally be on any time of the year. I can't speak on their behalf, but we will certainly give the suggestion to the police department that perhaps be the case.
I doubt they want coal in their stockings, so.
Thank you, Mrs.
One other
It's a
thing,
great
I
idea.
don't know, I mean, maybe it won't, we can't do nothing now, but, the state has given the county off on Friday,
Have they?
the 26th, yes.
I'm not aware.
And, yes,
When did they decide?
the other day.
Because as of this morning, they hadn't decided.
No, I was told the other day.
Well, unfortunately, the time,
They have decided.
They haven't decided.
they have
Well, no.
decided.
As of this morning,
Or state employees.
yeah.
And I would suggest that, and no, I'm not meaning to interrupt. We approve every year, the dates that we
Holidays.
give holidays. We just did that, what, about, not 3 meetings ago?
For next year, yeah.
So next year, if you wanted to take that under consideration, you can add or subtract dates from that list.
Okay.
I would suggest that be the time we do that, but, I
Maybe
don't
we could
think
give them an
anybody else-
extra day there in lieu of longevity pay.
Well, in this case, you are the authority.
You mean a Christmas Day
could make
bonus?
that happen. We're gonna move on from there. Anything else, Mrs. Alba?
No.
I mean,
No, sir.
Mrs. Goodbye.
Just remember the reason for this season.
Thank you very much, and we
And
appreciate your
Merry
input on
Christmas.
that. Mr. Pugh,
I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. Please remember, like Pam said, the reason for the season is Jesus Christ and the birth of our Savior. I'd like to thank everyone that came out to support the concert that I chaired for the Parish House the other night. That Sudden Link sponsored that. It was a very successful, and I certainly thank them. I thank Sudden Link also. And I just can't wait to get started for next year.
Oh, I have to interject there because I went and it was very well done. And Ron did a good job. I'm sure he had a lot of help.
thank you.
But I was disappointed that people in Buckhannon did not come. Any more people came, but it was very, very well done. I think it was very well done, and I hope it gets bigger every year. It's done pretty professional, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you for the team of Pugh and Kupari. Thank you very much. It was very observant. Mr. Thomas, sir, you got any comments or questions or
Well, just a couple of things.
motions?
I do think that, Mayor, we need to get a housing enforcement board meeting sometime in the first part of January.
Understood.
I think that's important to do. I would ask us, let's remember the possibility of the one ordinance we're looking at to, in respect to board members and their attendance, that have talked about that several times, and I think we need to keep that on the front burner rather than the back burner. And last, but certainly not least, is that this is a time of year where all of us should be thinking about what it's meaning to all of us, and to help those others that are less fortunate than us. And there's all different ways to do that. And I hope you all have an opportunity to have a wonderful Christmas and a safe Christmas. And a good New Year's too, because we won't be seeing you until after
That's right.
New Year's.
Don't get the ball games.
So, I'm the only one who said it.
Don't get sued next year.
See, I knew Elvis.
They're not done yet, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
okay.
Mrs. Simons.
I'm honored to be the newest member on council, and I'm excited to be so. I would like to wish everyone a nice holiday, Merry Christmas and the New Year's, and to be sure and remember the elderly, the disabled, the person next door that may not have family or someone to come around. So, Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Mrs. Simons. It's a pleasure for us to have you with us, and congratulations on your first meeting. I really can't repeat anything because you've heard it all already. All I can say is thank you very much for being in attendance tonight and being with us and your patience. Thank you, council members, for all you've done in 2014. I look forward to a really joyful 2015.
Can I say one
Having
more?
said that,
Can
I
say
will
one
adjourn
more?
this meeting.
Rick, Steve Harlow is our new cameraman.
Steve Harlow.
Mr. Harlow.
Here, here.
Hi, Steve.
And Merry Christmas to all our veterans.